We recently celebrated the 10-year anniversary of the medical marijuana program in Rhode Island. Until recently, Rhode Island has been regarded as having one of the best medical marijuana programs. It is not without its problems. The main problem has been access to this medicine. It's not like other medications. Other medications generally, when people go to CVS, they are paying a copay. Their insurance generally helps out. In the medical marijuana program, patients are left to their own devices to pay for it. Even if someone grows it, there's no such thing as free medical marijuana because it costs money to grow it, and it certainly costs money to go to the compassion centers. So we've had an ongoing problem, especially with our low-income patients, finding this medicine to be affordable. We were hoping this year to make some difference in that so that we could have more access for all of our about 13,000 patients now. You would expect a high percentage of them to be low income because to get into the medical marijuana program, you have to have a serious, debilitating medical condition. These are folks who are coping with bad diagnoses. Many of them have been through serious accidents, and they're coping. Many of them have lost their jobs. They've lost a lot of their support. And those are a lot of the patients that we're working with. So, in a way, the governor's proposal is a tax on tragedy, really, because these are folks who they don't want to be in the medical marijuana program. They're in the medical marijuana program because this is the medicine that works for them. And I think that's something that really has to be understood, because when this program started, it was all about compassion for patients. The late, great Thomas C. Slater and Senator Rhoda Perry were absolutely critical in moving this program forward. And it was all about taking care and protecting some of our most vulnerable citizens. Over time, more and more, this population of vulnerable patients are seen as a source of revenue. We saw it in the Chafee administration. They put a tax on the compassion centers, which is supposed to be nonprofits, yet they're paying taxes, and a 7% sales tax on every purchase of medical marijuana. So now we move on to this. The patients in this program are suffering right now. Not only are they coping with medical conditions, but they are coping with the insecurity of not knowing what is going to happen if this medicine is going to be there for them tomorrow, because this tax is so regressive. Not only is it a tax, and we'll talk more about that, but what they told us was that they based this on the fact that a marijuana plant, produces $17,000 in revenue annually. And that is such an offensive statement, not to mention a fantasy. When a patient grows a plant, or a caregiver grows a plant for the benefit of a patient, it produces medicine. It does not produce money at all. It produces medicine. And that's something that we've really got to be clear about. This plant is about producing medicine and not revenues. So I think, and by the way, there's been much speculation about who has this $17,000 plant, because we don't know who has it. A typical patient is producing, and you'll hear this, an ounce or two off a plant maybe. And if you were to have a plant that was large enough to produce $17,000 worth of revenue, you're probably looking at a plant that is probably as big as the Christmas tree you see at the State House, the holiday tree, excuse me, that you see at the State House at the holiday season. And you'd probably have to grow it for about 10 months. This is a fantasy, and you'll hear more about the kind of plants that patients actually do grow. So right now, the patients are angry, depressed, and honestly still in a state of disbelief that their own governor could be looking to basically take their medicine away from them and look to them for a source of revenue. It's draconian and it's mean. But it's not just about the tax on the medicine. It is also about other provisions in this. Oh, by the way, they talked about, one of the quotes the administration gave was that they're looking to have a level playing field. And again, this is about patients' access to their medicine. I don't know what level playing fields have to do with anything. That's a sports term. This is not about playing a sport here. We're talking about getting patients medicine. This is not about if the prices at the compassion centers are high, it's not about, so a patient grows their own medicine because they can't afford those prices, so we should bring their prices up to equal the prices that they can't afford. I don't know. So
Before you go into the additional details, why don't we hear from the patients and then go back to you about, and go back and you can talk about some of the other provisions.
Does this tax include the compassion centers?
no, in fact, this would lower the tax. They pay several. They pay, one of the taxes they pay is a 4% tax on grossly revenues, monthly revenues, and that would be reduced 1% to 3%.
Let's also hold off on questions until everybody's done. Okay.
Okay.
Right.
As was alluded to, we have the tax, which is like no other, but also we're talking about a reduction in plants. For a patient, it would be a 75% reduction. When Ellen was talking about plants, 6 plants, that includes baby plants. You know, to get mature plants, adult plants, you have to have babies first. So you're paying a tax, you have to have a tag on that little 2-inch plant there that may or may not live. So we're talking about 6 plants overall. Generally speaking, rule of thumb, if you're going to have 3 plants, you need 3 more babies because you have to keep a cycle going. Keeping in mind, by the way, a patient is only allowed to possess 2.5 ounces of dried usable cannabis. So anyway, so some people might think, well, just grow bigger plants. It doesn't work that way. You can only have 2.5 ounces. So if you have a plant that's producing a lot, you're going to be illegal. So there's that. Caregivers, it's a little more complicated to explain the reduction. If they have 1 patient, they also are going to go through that 75% reduction in plants. It's less of a percentage the more patients they have. However, with Ellen and Peter, they are patients. They are also caregivers. So they've always been allowed to have some plants for themselves, some plants for the patients. This proposal says no. You don't get any for yourself. Count yourself as one of your patients now. So that's why Ellen refers to, she would have to drop one of her patients, and she would be her own patient. Again, so she would get 0 plants as a patient now, 0. In addition to having fewer plants for her patients. So even if people could or would pay this tax, they're going to get much less medicine. In many cases, definitely not enough. So your typical patient, if they're growing the 6 plants, which is probably 3 mature, 3 babies, paying $900, getting 75% less for that. The other provision that Bobby is referring to is, you know, after a year or so into the medical marijuana program, when some of the patients figured out how to grow and they started doing well, some of them were going over their limits. It was very important for them to stick to the law, you know. So we were getting phone calls at RIPAC that said, wait, I'm going over my limit. What should I flush it? Should I flush it? And we said, oh, good Lord, we've got so many people who don't have that medicine. So what the legislature did, they put in a provision so that a patient who gets, or a caregiver who has some excess, can give it to someone who needs it. And this has been, I have seen the best of humanity in this program when it comes to that, I'll tell you. And so that's what Bobby was referring to. You're talking to people who are growing their own medicine. They don't have much for themselves, but whatever they have that's extra goes to someone who needs it. That is removed from the government. No longer are you protected legally if you do that. For some reason, that was just removed. Those are the major ones.
Okay.